And there we go. For those of you in the land of social media, hello and welcome, everybody. So I'm Felipe. You may see Billy beside me. I'm going to take a couple quick seconds to share from the virtual Whisky Masterclass page onto my own personal page so we can have as many people watching as possible as we do our little charity whiskey tasting. So give me 2 seconds, and then we'll officially kick off with the drinking of the high-strength alcohol on a Monday. So just 2 seconds, everybody, and we shall get going.
He says that I've been training people all day. So part of the training process, of course, is that you have to drink all the things you're training people about. It's a difficult life that Felipe and I lead, but we bear these crosses, for everybody else.
In my case, my day was wrangling our beautiful little 5-month-old baby through a shopping mall, her first shopping mall experience. And it was both it was painful and also encouraging that we could pull it off. If a little depressing.
Excellent work. Excellent work.
That's we want to train her in the ways of capitalism, right? So, right, I think that's me shared. We're good to go. We've got people joining. I see we've got some views already coming in. So let us begin officially. So hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Felipe Schrieberg. With me here is the excellent Billy Abbott. We write about whiskey. We host tastings. We drink a lot of whiskey and spirits in general. And this little thing here, so as you can tell by my glorious American accent, I'm based in Poland. I'm in the city of Gdansk. I'm a Polish partner and a Polish baby. And essentially, just from seeing what's currently happening with the current geopolitical situation, with the large amount of people that are coming in to shelter themselves from the violence, it just made sense to do something that supports some of the organizations doing amazing work with refugees. So today's tasting, all the proceeds, and for everybody that donated or bought packs, all the proceeds are going to the Polish Humanitarian Action, who are doing work with refugees at the border and selling them in and just trying to help as many people as possible, because we've got, I think, 1.5 million people here in Poland fleeing violence. And then the links to donate, and I will be repeating this PSA as we go throughout the tasting. But for those of you watching, you will see both on Facebook and YouTube, there are links to donate in the comments or in the video description. So if you can donate, this would be massively appreciated. And so with that, we've got a pack of whiskeys that we're going to drink our way through. And we're going to be bringing on a whole bunch of amazing guests to join us. And just a couple quick words about me and as to why I'm just some random dude talking about whiskey. So I write about whiskey. My main gig is writing for whiskey for Forbes.com, but I write regularly for Whisky Magazine, for Unfiltered, and a few other publications as well. And most recently, if I can be forgiven for tooting my own horn, I did just win Communicator of the Year at the Icons of Whiskey Awards, and that'll be the last I ever mention that. Hopefully, I can be forgiven for my arrogance. But with me is the excellent Billy Abbott. Billy, can I have you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, well, as Felipe says, my name is Billy Abbott. I am not American. However, my family is all Polish back in the day. And so when Felipe sort of grabbed me and said, do you want to do something to try and help people who are coming into Poland? It's like, yeah, well, yes, I've been trying to find something to do and, jump to the chance to be able to run a tasting, do something to try and sort of help folks. My background is I'm a computer programmer. But about a decade ago, I accidentally stopped doing that and became instead a whiskey writer. And so by day, I work for the Whisky Exchange we're not entirely certain what I do at the Whisky Exchange, but I do things at the Whisky Exchange. I write, I talk, I present, I'm my company's brand ambassador. I get out there, tell people about the wonderful world of booze, including whiskey. And by night, I also do all those same things again as a hobby and occasionally for money. But also, and this is the only time I'll mention this, but last year I was the Icons of Whiskey Rest of World Communicator of the Year. Not the overall one, unfortunately, no. And the previous year I was nominated and didn't win. And this year, Felipe won. So there we go. However, I was at the award ceremony and I was the one who messaged him, and he seemed very confused by the fact that he was even up for an award. So very modest, as he says, and that is, of course, the last you'll hear of that from either of us.
It is true. So, Billy, you're responsible for me actually being able to brag about myself. You're enabling American arrogance. Thank you. Well, with that, so let's get right to the drinking, shall we? We are getting through 6 whiskeys in slightly less than an hour and a half, and we've got to bring some guests on as well. So for those of you that have the packs, we are going to kick off with the Compass Box. Now, before I kick off the Compass Box, let's do a little bit of boring admin. First, if you comment on either YouTube or Facebook, we will see it. Any questions, any comments, we want to see them. We'll get stuck in. We will get to you, we promise. So please do get stuck in. Also, for those of you drinking, whether you've got a pack or a different whiskey, have some water ready to both stay hydrated and to add to the whiskey. We're not going to be going in the order of the pack. We're going to be going in a random order that I've determined and that Billy's approved of. So that means it should be okay. And yeah, Compass Box to kick off. Now,
Cool.
Before we do the Compass Box, I'll let people pour it all in, give a little bit of time, and then we'll do a little virtual cheers, a Nazdrovia slash slancha, and we'll get started with everything, gang. But welcome and thank you for joining us.
Excellent. Well, first, you say we have the Compass Box. Which Compass Box is it, Felipe?
It's the Spice Tree, Billy. Apologies. I should have made that clear. The Compass Box Spice Tree. Once you do a little drink, Billy will take over and actually.
There we go. Hoorays of watching YouTube videos of people doing this and then realizing their camera doesn't work. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Oh yeah, and these lovely packs that we have here. If you are one of the lovely people who have one of these lovely packs from the folks at the Dram Team, Chris and the gang, who are absolutely lovely and really good mates. So, cool. Anyway, give me a nod when I should start talking about things. I'm going to pour this for a little bit.
Well, first, we already have a question. Gavin asked, "This is the illegal one," and the answer is yes.
Now it's no. This unfortunately is not the illegal version, because while we are incredibly generous people and from that, we don't quite have the funds to fund the now horrifically expensive illegal ones. But we'll get onto that in a second when we talk about them. And Gavin, I know you know this story probably better than I think you probably told me a load of this story. But anyway, shall we jump into what this is? So this is a whiskey from a company called Compass Box. So Compass Box are a blending company started by a guy called John Glazer back in 2000, I think it was. And they're a really interesting company anyway. They, John's background was as a winemaker, and then he went on to work for Diageo, specifically working as like the brand boss, pretty bad manager, brand ambassador, everything for Johnny Walker. And so he was Mr. Johnny Walker Black Label for a while. And he then decided he wanted to make his own company. And the past 20 years, he and a variety of excellent folks who've come in to work with him have created some of the best blended whiskies out in the world. You know, we're sort of often in the single malt world. In the whiskey world, this is a obsession with single malt whiskies, which really, stomps on things like blended whiskies and grain whiskies and all this sort of thing. And Compass Box are a company who really, when they appeared back, 20 years ago, they really changed the game when it came to blended whiskies and sort of like brought this new side to the general market. We had regular everyday blended whiskey stuff that's on supermarket shelves, and you had these ridiculously high-end things that often appeared in Asia and were covered in gold. And John and the gang brought this in between, this bit which is a bit premium, but maybe not too expensive. And occasionally something very expensive as well. They do make some shiny things as well. But the Spice Tree is a whiskey that sort of sits in the middle of all their different things, from the peat monster, which goes down the peaty side of things, through to I can't remember the name of the new whiskey. I was drinking it the other day. The orchardy one, the name of which I can't remember.
I think literally the orchard.
There we go. I know everything really. But which replaced some other older whiskies they have, which go on the lighter side of things. And Spice Tree is a whiskey with a load of interesting history, which really, as Gavin was saying, is this the illegal one? There was a version which turned out to potentially be, depending on your opinions on the law, illegal or not. So, so before I jump in, jump any more. So, Felipe, you got anything you want to add about this for the moment?
I would say a quick admin thing is, especially since we have Billy here, for whiskey newbies here with us, we are going to get geeky. You've been warned. We will try to keep things as accessible as possible as we go. The only thing I've got to say is, sláinte, Billy. Thank you so much for joining for this. So cheers, everybody. And
cheers, everyone. Yeah, definitely.
Have a sniff and a sip. And Compass Box, as a company, they do a lot of kooky things. So Compass Box, when I was talking to John about some of the stuff they do, two of the things that I find really interesting, and this is before we get into the spice tree itself, which has got, we could spend a lot of time on the spice tree just because there's lots of things to say. But when they fill their casks, they don't fill them all the way. They make sure that they actually keep, I forget what the exact percentage of the fill is, but they fill a lot less than almost any other whiskey company does. The idea being that it'll give more intensity of flavor and aroma in the maturation. And the second thing they do is, slight bit of geekery here, is when you are putting the spirit that becomes your whiskey in the cask, usually it will be watered down. It'll then be watered down usually after you take it out of the cask, but usually be watered down. One of the very common percentages is 63.5%, which a lot of distilleries will water it down to before they put it in the cask. Compass Box waters down to 58%. Again, the thinking that they are going to be able to get more as a result. So those are just two fun little geeky facts about what they do. That shows how they really think hard about what they do and why they do it, and they're not afraid to be inefficient in doing so as well. So I'll throw that in as my facts, Billy.
Well, let's say you jump onto the illegality and things like that as part of the story of what it is. But so this is a blended whiskey. So it's a combination of some grain whiskey, which is generally a lighter style of spirit, which you then season, is the way I talk about it. And you season this whiskey with other little bits of more flavoursome single malt whiskies. A Compass Box, unlike most other blenders, use quite a lot of malt whiskey in their blends, rather than sort of relying on this much lighter style of whiskey to provide the core of it. They have that, but they add in quite a lot. Again, often it's like 50-50 malt and grain, as opposed to sort of like 20-80s it might be in some other places. But also they like publishing recipes. So for instance, I've got the recipe here up in front of me and I have a little whirly diagram which tells me, some of the text goes upside down. So I've got Dhavall, Clynelish, Highland Malt Blend, which is one of their special sort of things they put together in different types of cask. And there's 4 different Highland Malt blends using different types of cask, different types of toast on their cask, different types of oak, all mixed together with some Clynelish and Dhavall. And a way to tell a whiskey that John Glaze has been involved with is to see if it's got Clynelish in it. If it's a blended whiskey that says Clynelish all over it, John might have something to do with it. He does love Clynelish. But a spice tree, when they first started out, because I said they're playing around with cask and different types of toasting levels, so how much they heat it up before they, when they're making the cask, they sort of toast the inside, but rather than setting fire to it, helps them bend the staves and just releases some of the flavors in the wood a little bit. And then they also burn the crap out of the inside of it as well, in order to make it so it works really well for sort of making whiskey mature better. But on this toasting level thing, they play around with different things. But back in the day, they also said, how do we get more spiciness into the spice tree? How do we do that? So they said, well, what about if we stick some more staves, more bits of wood in the whiskey, in the cask? And they did this, and really lovely, really nice spicy thing. But the Scotch Whisky Association, who look after the rules about what you can and can't do in whiskey making in Scotland, they react to complaints from their members, and most big companies in Scotland are members. So somebody complained that Compass Box were being naughty and not doing something traditional, and Compass Box had their wrists slapped and told off until they couldn't do that. And so they just went back to using normal casks. It turned out actually they didn't do that at all. They went back to using casks which they fiddled with, and rather than just hanging bits of wood inside it, they stuck new French oak on the inside of the heads of the cask to get loads of extra French oak contact and to give it this extra spiciness, but in a way that nobody noticed. And so consequently, they got away with it for years and years, and now nobody's going to complain anymore. So it was illegal because they broke the rules, the rule being be traditional, and this stuff if people knew back then what they were doing with this, they probably would have broken the rules with this as well. But it's just normal now, as ever. Traditional changes over the years. But what they're going for here is this wonderful combination of sort of soft and toffees and sort of like caramelly sort of notes and a little bit of spice, with this building extra spiciness in there from all these different types of toasted oak to bring out all this oaky, spicy flavor into the whiskey. So we've got some questions popping up. Sorry, not a blend, it's a blended malt. Sorry, yeah, half asleep. As I said, I've been training all day since 9 o'clock, so this is now up to hour 12 in front of a camera. So I do apologize if I lose it slightly in the start. If my underpants come off and go on my head at any point in time, Felipe, please remove me from the stream. There we go.
Absolutely not. I'm going to keep you on the stream, and I should hope to see such a sight.
Yeah. Sorry. So thank you very much, Sandy. Yeah. So this isn't a blend; it's a blended malt. Compass Box do a combination of blends and blended malts. I have not tried Spice Tree for way too long, and I had forgotten. So yeah, this is all malt whiskies. As I should know, because I just told you it was a load of Highland malt blend and a load of other distilleries, which are all malts. So there we go. Anyway,
yeah, so I'm going to step in quickly. So this is from looking at the recipe, and this is new, by the way, in tiny, tiny, tiny letters. In fact, I'm going to put it right now online so people can look at it. In tiny, tiny letters on the bottom right-hand corner of their recipe thing, they put in an update where they've mentioned that they've swapped to a new Highland. So their Highland malt blend is a proprietary recipe that they spread across different kinds of casks. They swapped the blend and what goes into the blend as of March 2021. I did not know this until I had a quick peek-see not long before the tasting. And they've switched from using ex-Diageo malts to non-Diageo malts, interestingly enough. So that's real interesting. I actually think we don't have the new Spice Tree blend. I think we have the old one. So we have the ones with the Diageo one specifically. Let me have a quick look at
There we go. We've got from Diageo, Kleinlich, Tierninnik, and Dalyuen. So yeah, in this, basically, it's just those three distillers. But no, one of the things about these whiskies from Compass Box is they make them in really small batches. So when you get one, if you wait 6 months and buy another bottle, you might have a different blend, and it'll be very similar tasting. They create these things and bat them together and work to a flavor profile, but it might be a slightly different one each time. And if they ever change the recipe majorly, they post up a new recipe like they have done here to tell you what's going on. They're really open. They really like to tell you what's happening with it. And across all of their whiskies, they tell you as much information as they can, which has led to some problems in the past due to the fact there's occasionally you're not allowed to give as much information as you might want to. And Compass Box got told off for that a load of times. So anyway, I'm be quiet in a moment just because I feel rather stupid for thinking that Spice Tree was a blend, considering it was the first thing I ever had from Compass Box. And I know the entire team, and they are literally based about half-hour walk down the road from my house. So humiliation. Well done, Billy. You have helped yourself so well already today.
You have to parade you through Game of Thrones style. Shame.
Anyway, before we move on, before I move on talking about this, yes, Spice Tree is available all over the place. It's probably Compass Box's most famous whiskies are probably Spice Tree and Peat Monster. Peat Monster is a bloody good name. And I have to say, well done them for getting in the steam of that before somebody else did. Spice Tree, also bloody good name. That, along with the fact they're really good whiskies, has really helped them just get out absolutely everywhere. If you go to an off license that's got a vaguely fancy whiskey selection, you'll be able to find both Spice Tree and the rest of the Compass Box range, Peat Monster, Spice Tree especially. But yes, all over the place. And yes, they are available from thewhiskeyexchange.com. That is the only time I'll be advertising my employer.
That's why I already advertised for you in the comments, Billy. Somebody asked about where to find it, and I mentioned in the comments.
I noticed. Good work. So yeah, you're allowed to advertise my employer as much as you possibly want to. So that's all good.
No, it's all good. What I'll also do before we move on, just because I'm conscious for time as well, and we've got to move on to Glenturret and our first guest, is what I like to do in my tastings, especially for the whiskey newbies who are joining us and taking a chance on this strong stuff that we're drinking, is I like to share pretentious bluffing tips. Now, I'll be sharing a few of them as we go along. And Billy, I am going to request that you have to share your own pretentious bluffing tips as we go. But the idea is I want everybody who comes to my tastings to know how to sound smart about whiskey for the rest of their lives, even if they know nothing about whiskey. My first pretentious bluffing tip is this. Doesn't matter what whiskey it is. Doesn't matter what you're drinking. The cheap stuff, the expensive crap. You can always say the whiskey smells and tastes like vanilla. Always, right? And the reason why is based on science. Some of you that might have been to my tastings will have heard me use this spiel because I always do this spiel. And because the compound that gives vanilla its unique aroma and flavor is called vanillin. And vanillin you can find in many other places, beyond the orchid pods of Madagascar, where they normally come from, where it normally comes from. And oak wood contains vanillin. So when you take an oak cask, and remember, whiskey is aged in oak 99.9% of the time. You take an oak cask, you fill it with high-strength alcoholic spirit. The oak breaks down into a whole bunch of different compounds that provide aromas and flavors. One of those is vanillin. So they'll empty the cask into a bottle, pour the bottle into a glass. You will have vanillins in your glass of whiskey, even if you don't smell or taste the vanilla. And that's why you can always say, oh yeah, I'm getting a bit of vanilla from this. But if you want to sound really pretentious and up your pretentiousness game, you can go, oh, you can really feel those vanillins coming through the oak here. And because you're referring to the vanillins specifically, you're showing that you know your chemistry and nobody will want to mess with you. Yes. So that's one of various tips we'll be offering.
And I have another little topper to that one. You know, if you're sitting there and somebody else has already dropped in a vanilla or even gone down the vanillin route or something like that, just go, oh, I'm getting more tonka bean. Yeah.
Ooh, yes.
Tonka bean is a very, very, very weird flavor that combines loads of different things. But one of the things it definitely has is vanilla. And so for years, I'd never tried a tonka bean, so I assumed it just tasted like vanilla. So I used it as a euphemism for vanilla when I ran out of words that said vanilla. Then I tried one, and it's one of the most incredible, complex, weird flavors ever. But just drop a tonka in if someone else is getting vanilla, and yeah, that's just, oh really? Only vanilla? Oh, never mind. Maybe one day.
Excellent. With that, gang, so let's move on, I think. And we'll move on to the Glenturret is up next. Now, before I introduce our next guest, I'm going to just give everybody just a little bit of time to transition between whiskeys, so that way we don't leave people behind. And what I'm going to do as we transition between whiskeys and before we bring on our first guest is a little bit more pretentiousness. I'm going to take you through a good way to nose whiskey, and it's going to get pretentious. What I'm going to start with of various techniques that I'll be displaying throughout the evening is one I like to call the French technique, because I learned this at a cognac tasting. You want to find the ideal distance between nose and glass to pick up as many subtle and delicate aromas as possible. Now, how do you find it? Move your glass to your stomach, start doing lots of little sniffs, and as you do lots of little sniffs, raise your glass up towards your nose. And the moment you get a whiff of anything from that glass, you stop, bring it in another 3 to 5 centimeters closer. There should be a slightly awkward distance between nose and glass, and that is the ideal distance. And by doing lots of little sniffs, you're going to avoid all the unpleasant aromas and get all the pleasant aromas that will be, maybe those vanillins will come through, for example. Yes. So that's the French technique to nose some whiskey as you have your Glenturret ready. With that, let's introduce our first guest to talk about whiskey number 2. So I'm going to add to the stream Mr. Jamie Morrison from Glenturret. He's the global brand ambassador for Glenturret, who have been doing a lot of very interesting things lately, but I'll let Jamie talk about it a bit more, and Billy and I will grill him a bit. Jamie, welcome. And let me change the banner. We are not on the cup.
I've got to say, you got the wrong whiskey up. Hey, there we go. That's the one.
I got it. Technology. Jamie, welcome. Talk us through whiskey number 2, please.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Very nice to be here. So we're looking at just now the Glenturret 12-year-old from the maiden release in 2020. So our thoughts were with this whiskey is that it really forms what we would say is the heart of our range. We've got 4 whiskies in the core range, and the 12-year-old sits right in the middle. Hence, we like to call it the heart of the range, if you like. Now, by the fact that we do everything very traditionally at Glenturret, manually operated, etc., we like to think of it as being that sort of the heart, the connection, and then from the hands to the heart, if you like. So what you've got in front of you is bottled at 46% ABV. It's natural in colour and it's non-chill filtered. And we're looking here at the Glenturret spirit matured solely in European oak casks. Now, when I say European oak casks, we know that the various different types of casks, but the European oak that we're talking about here doesn't always come from Spain. Sometimes it will come from mid to Central Europe. Brings with it a little bit of a different flavour. So for us, we find that it's a little bit of a more subtle, softer side to European oak that you may be normally familiar with. So we're not talking big, sort of bold fireside whiskey here. We're talking a little bit more, for me, something like a mid-afternoon slice of cake. So think vanilla sponge, think a little bit of kind of buttercream on there. You get a little bit of sweetness coming. Spice comes through for me, and it's very, very subtle, but you're getting a little bit of cinnamon there. And ginger is quite common for Glenturret. And for me, what is better than a nice big slice of cake than a nice cup of tea to go with it? So for me, it's not like a cup of Tetley's tea or your favourite brand. Others are available, of course. Let's think about lemon tea, like a fruit tea, and that sort of fruity character you get on, especially on the palate with this one. For us, it comes directly from the spirit that we produce. Long fermentation, really nice estery, light, fresh spirit, and we hope that kind of carries through the range. So, yeah, more of a mid-afternoon sort of dram, I would say. Actually, perfect for just after this time of night.
Well, going on that sort of line about cakes and things like that, for me, I always get for this one sort of Danish pastries, like sort of like the whole sort of like pastry thing, that a little bit of like custard in there as well, and that lemony thing as well. Yeah, a lemon, well, I say a lemon Danish pastry. If that's a thing, I want one. But yeah,
I mean, it can be a thing, Billy. It can be a thing. Let's make it a thing.
It has that patisserie type sort of vibe to it. Is the thing I get, but there's so much more going on behind it.
For me, sometimes it's almost like you've got a short crust pastry that's just been in the oven slightly too long, and it's got a slight tinge to it, but the sweetness is still there. It's a very interesting drum.
So yeah, popping up in the comments, we've got some marmalade, definitely gingerbread. We also have a tonka bean buttercream. Nikki, you're on my list of people to keep an eye out for. But yeah, so
I was going to say
that citrusy thing. Yeah.
I was going to sorry, Billy. I was going to say one of your pretentious things to nose, and the one that I love is.
Oh
no.
We lost Jamie, and it wasn't my fault. I may have had trouble with angles, but he did
he's left us on a cliffhanger as well.
I know, right? Oh wait, I've got him in the studio again. Wait, and he's back. We recovered.
I had no idea. I was talking away to myself.
You left us on a cliffhanger. You said the thing which you love is, and then it just disappeared.
So when people talk about it's because there's a Christmas cake. It's when you can say, oh yes, Christmas cake, yes, and it can encompass so many different things, and it can sometimes let you off.
Yeah, I am somebody who's quite good at giving what seems to be a very specific tasting note, which you actually realize is actually almost absolutely everything. And yeah, Christmas cake is an absolutely excellent one for that one. Good work.
It's a winner.
I'd say for somebody who works for a distillery who likes playing with a sherry cask on occasion, it's a very, very useful one to drop in every now and again.
It is indeed. It's for me. It's all about painting pictures that people can recognise. We've all been there where somebody talks about walking through the barley field whilst the wind was coming from the west, and they believe it was a Tuesday, and that doesn't resonate with us. So for me, I'd like to try and paint pictures. And I mean, for anybody that knows me, I love a bit of cake. So for me, it's about sweet things and desserts, and it works, I think.
While we're talking about the Glenturret, one of the things that I love about Glenturret that I think is absolutely crazy is if you look at the way the industry works in Scotch whiskey, is one of the words that gets prized amongst brands is consistency, right? That everything has to, let's say a Glenfiddich 12, which is a lovely whiskey, But that Glenfiddich 12 has to taste as similar as possible over the years, because that way the consumers that like it will keep buying it, etc. Glenturret, when you guys did your relaunch, there's a reason we've got the 2020 year in the name of the whiskey. You guys have made a very conscious decision to not prioritize consistency as much. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. When we looked at the stocks that we have in the warehouse, we're very aware that we have the freedom in terms of being a nimble distillery, not creating a huge amount of liquid, that we can afford to play around a little bit. And for us, it's about creating the best representation every year, but that might change. So for me, the easiest way to explain it, in my opinion, is if we think about a box, that the style of each expression will always sit within that box somewhere, but we do have freedom to move the center point around. And again, for us, it's about creating that point of difference, and we are able to create something different every year. And I think that's a nice thing to be able to do if you have the opportunity. So, for example, the 2020 edition that we're drinking just now, it was all European oak casks that were used, whereas the 2021 we introduced some American oak casks, just as to create a different, slightly different flavor profile. There is commonality, but they're all sort of dealt with as an individual whiskey in their own right, if you like.
Oh, that's absolutely brilliant. What I will also say is, to expand a little bit on what Billy and Jamie were talking about, to add to pretentiousness, talking about Christmas cake. Now, as you mentioned, Jamie, Glenturret, this Glenturret European oak with the sherry. But whenever you hear, for the newbies, if you're drinking a whiskey and you hear the word sherry, use Christmas cake. Use it. Abuse it. It will keep you safe. You'll sound clever. It's absolutely one of the great go-to whiskey connoisseur terms that you can use as well. I am going to continuously point these kinds of terms out.
At the same time, be very, very careful what country you're in when you're talking about it, because Christmas cake varies enough from country to country that, but say in the US, Christmas cake, the other one is wedding cake. I remember once sort of thinking, I'm not going to say Christmas cake. I'll drop in a wedding cake because, that I can make some comment about a marriage a little bit later on. Perfect, done it. And people in the US went, it's not a particularly interesting white cake. What are you talking about? That's not the right thing, because be sure of your cultural reference when you're making your tasting notes. Make sure you're hitting the right places. But Christmas cake, you're fairly safe,
especially in the UK. Nikki has put in the comments that by adding a bit of water, it brought out the sweet edge. So a quick note for anybody that wants to look at adding water, I do recommend trying all the whiskeys we've got neat to start, and then just add a few drops at a time, especially if it feels too strong, bitter, or alcoholic. A few drops at a time. Go incrementally, because if you throw in too much and drown your whiskey flavored water is one of the saddest things on earth. So just a few drops at a time, taste it again, and go incrementally. And never, also for those of you who might think that you should never add water, never underestimate the power of water to make a wonderful difference in whiskey. Will never go wrong. And on a molecular level, if you look at whiskey has hundreds of compounds you can smell and taste, right? The fancy word for this is congeners. When you're adding water, you're not just diluting the alcohol. You are breaking apart the chemical bonds between the congeners and the alcohols that are locking them up. And you're literally adding new flavors, unlocking new flavors on a molecular level by adding water. This is why water is always useful. And don't listen to the water haters. But in any case,
and if you're incredibly mal-coordinated like I am, ensure that at all times you have some form of water delivery device that does not involve pouring out of a gigantic water carrier. It's a lot easier to, this way around. But if you don't have something like this, I'd say just grab yourself a teaspoon. A teaspoon is a perfectly easy one, and the other one is a bottle cap. Now, if you have like a bottle of water, well, this is a bottle of whiskey, so you don't want to do this. But literally, that is one of the most perfect measuring devices for adding a couple of drops of water to anything. I have no coordination at all, and so consequently, if I have a glass of water or a jug of water, it goes all over the table and me as well as in the whiskey. So yeah, lots nice and easy to pour things around if you find a suitable vessel.
We've got a couple comments that have come in. Jason Standing, hello Jason, and it's been a while. Hopefully I'll see you soon. He asked if I'm not a big Mizawari fan. No. A lot of people are. I can't do it. I just can't do Mizawari.
For folks who don't know, Mizawari is basically just whiskey and water, but normally you're looking at 2-to-1 water to whiskey, 3-to-1. It's like the non-fizzy version of a highball, and very, very popular in Japan, hence Mizawari being a Japanese term. I am a big fan. And I champion whenever I can, even to the point of I'm going to an opening of a bar in London this Friday, which is called Soda and Friends, which is all about long drinks and highballs and all that sort of thing. A bar entirely built around the concept. So there we go. That's my one plug for a mate of mine. He's let me come along to the opening night, so I have to say something. But yeah, Soda and Friends. There we go. It's in a weird bit of London. It's quite weird over there. Anyway, yes, back over to you.
What are your opinions on water in Glenturret? And then we'll have to move on. We're going into rambling territory.
I think when you've bought yourself a bottle of whiskey, you've got yourself a dram, if you want to add water to it, nobody's going to stop you. Don't be afraid to do things with your whiskey. Mix it into something, give it a try, put it in some food, try it with some ice. There's no whiskey police, although some people would have you believe differently. But for me, I don't put water in a 12-year-old, but our 10-year-old peat smoke, I put a little bit of water in that, and I feel that it actually takes away a little bit of the sweetness for me, and it brings out a little bit more of salinity. So it makes that sort of sea salty note come forward a little bit. It's a little bit higher strength in this one as well. So that's probably why I add a little bit of water. But effectively what I'm saying is there's no right or wrong answer. You do you, and educate people that people who look at you and say, don't put water in your whiskey, just tell them to go away.
And on that 10-year-old peat smoke, the sample I got when the distillery first released them, and I was writing taste notes for the Whiskey Exchange, I had a dram left, so I did that with some ice and some fizzy water. It makes it absolutely top highball. Excellent whiskey for that.
Yeah, awesome. Glad you enjoyed it.
With that, Jamie, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Thanks for talking us through the Glenturret. We are gonna move on, gang. We're gonna move on.
Take care. See you later.
By the way, somebody in the comments has mentioned that Glenturret is the only distillery to have a Michelin star. We do have to mention this. We really do have to mention this. So there's a Michelin star at Glenturret because the restaurant's that amazing, and I'm still waiting to go there someday. Hopefully sooner rather than later. So
well, it would be a pleasure to see you both at the distillery actually. So let's try and make that happen. And yeah, we can have some fun.
Absolutely, Jamie. Thank you so much and good night. Now, we're going to move on to the next whiskey. We're going to go to the Jura next, and we're going to bring our next guest on soon. Before I do so, while we have people start to transition between whiskeys, some quick comments. So, on YouTube, Savozi is asked, is putting ice frowned upon? I like it a bit cooler, but don't want to look daft. Now, as Jamie said, you do you. If you like it with ice, take it with ice. Absolutely. The comment that I will make is I would say ice is like, it's a cultural thing. Depends where in the world you're drinking your whiskey. So if you go into a single malt bar in the UK or Europe, you order a really nice single malt of some kind, and then you ask for ice to be put in it. Some of the bartenders, and I say some, they'll give you a look. It is not quite the done thing. But let's say you go to the US or Japan, and you ask for really nice whiskey, then ask for ice to be put in it, they'll very happily do so. And they take the way they do ice to extreme art forms. It can get really interesting, and you can play a lot with ice. The reason you don't see ice very often in fancy pants tastings like this one is that ice, I would say, because you're chilling it, it acts like a flavor filter. So you're kind of blocking certain aromas and flavors from coming through while allowing others to pass through. And if that makes your whiskey better, that's awesome. But in what I like to think, or how I approach it, is in a fancy pants tasting, you're trying to pick up as much as possible from the liquid. So adding ice gets in the way of that goal a little bit. So that's I'll use that as my ice explanation. Billy, anything to add to that?
No, I drink pretty much anything with ice. I like icy things. So, but the thing, that thing you were saying, people say ice shuts down flavor and you can't taste things. No, ice changes there are this many flavors in your whiskey. Normally you'll taste these bits. With ice, it will shift the window. And if you think of it that way, then ice is just a thing which reveals different aspects of your whiskey and can be great. So yeah, play. This is what Jamie was saying. Play with your whiskey. It's an ingredient. Make it taste nice. Stick it in your dinner. It's just another thing which tastes nice. Don't be quite so precious about it. At the same time, don't stick ice in my whiskey without permission.
And don't stick ice in other people's whiskey without permission either.
Anybody, let everybody do what they want to do. But at the same time, it's fine. It's great. Have ice if you want to, but don't stick it in my whiskey unless I ask for some.
Let's bring on our next guest. So Billy is going to shepherd us through the Jura, but I'm also going to welcome the Jura brand home ambassador who's checking in from the Isle of Jura, Mr. Mark Bruce. Mark, hello and welcome.
Oh, we can't hear you, Mark. You seem to have gone quiet all of a sudden.
There
we go. There you are.
2 years into these, and I'm still leaving it on mute.
Oh, dear. No, excellent to see. And when you popped up earlier on, we were doing our little tech test. So I went, both Felipe and I, you put your camera on, and you were just off screen. We're like, we both recognize where he is. So where are you at the moment?
I'm sitting within our former cooperage, which is one of the very few original buildings from 1810 here at the distillery. And what we did a few years ago was we converted it into a bar. So now it's sort of home to all the fun that we have here at the distillery.
Well, I say the reason why I know of it is turning up during the Isla Festival on a day where I managed to escape Isla to have, find a pile of bands and a large number of cocktails and other weird, wonderful things coming across the bar and happening around there. So, it's a great little venue and
yes.
Really enjoyed it. But anyway, we have some Jura 7 wood in front of us. Before I make some comments about things, and it's a bit of a weird whiskey. When you relaunched the whole of the Jura range a little while back, 7 wood was the one that caught people's eye due to the fact that it's called 7 wood. And so you have double wood and you have triple wood, and it was always like Jura going, oh no, we're going to beat you all with this.
We're going to outdo you.
And so even before it came out and before people tried it, people sort of like talked about it, but not necessarily in the best way. But when I found out what it actually was, I'll say probably the most interesting whiskey in that new range, and one which I'm quite fond of. So can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I couldn't agree with you anymore as well, because the Jura 7 wood for me, this one right here, it's a whiskey within the core range of the signature series that always shows you a different aspect of the kind of whiskey that we make. And you spoke a little bit earlier about Compass Box, joining you guys as you've been going through this tasting. And this whiskey in particular within the series is actually the brainchild or the work of Greg Glass. And Greg Glass himself cut a lot of his teeth at Compass Box. And when he came across to White & Mackay to join us here as our blender, he grabbed this project by the horns and brought about a real sort of fun and invigorating and almost like a maverick style of making whiskey into the business. And for that, I thank him a lot personally, because as I said, each and every time I reach this whiskey, I find something different. And 7 wood, written on the front of the bottle there, is referring to 7 different sources of oak that we use to mature this whiskey. Initial maturation for Jura whiskey, for 99% of what we make, is actually in American white oak ex-bourbon casks. And the 6 other sources of wood are coming from 6 different regions or forests across France. Each of those regions or each of those forests have been chosen because they add different aromas and different flavor characteristics to the dram or to the whiskey. whether it be Vosges or Allier, Troncer, you name it, each of them will drive different sort of flavors and you know, different components, as I said, into your dram. So it's always something to just take a moment and stop with, and sort of exactly what you're doing there, Billy, is dipping in and out and just sort of thinking about what it is you can smell and ultimately what it is that you can taste.
That's the thing. You say, you know, every time you sort of dive in, you get something a little bit different. Underneath it, there's still that rich, grainy, sort of jury character, some load of cereal in there, a little sort of wispy bit of smoke knocking around in there as well. And you know, that's one of the things I know from your new range. You brought in a little bit of smoke into everything rather than sort of moving around. But you say that there's lots of different woody things, and it's not just here's a whack of wood. It's just lots of little things which I over the years have associated with wood, but lots of things going on.
Yes, I mean, it's very, very delicate. If you look, as this project has evolved over the years, starting out in what would have been a lot of new oak, we sort of start to reuse the casks, don't we? So the proportion of what's being finished is varying. We run a very, very light spirit off our stills here. And the main reason for that is because we've got some of the tallest pot stills in Scotland. Okay, so sort of the underlying spirit characteristic is very fruity, very bright, it's very light. And that runs through all of our range. The American white oak drives the sweetness, and the different sort of woods coming from these regions adding sort of layers of flavor and different things on top of the whiskey. Little bit of smoke in there, yes, there is, and that sort of finds itself across the majority of what we make. But just to sort of put a number on that, it's no more than about 3 to 5%. So we use the smoky element in our whiskey very, very gently, and it's mainly there to add a little bit of muscle and structure to the dram.
Yeah, and a comment from Nikki in the comments on Facebook again, saying that it feels very different in the mouth. The texture is very different to Glenturret, you know. And again, that's the whole thing of having a Glenturret sort of slightly weightier spirit, but then working with casks in one way, and your slightly lighter spirit, but working with that some new oak, and you know, bringing a lot of those sort of creamy, sort of like French oak sort of notes in there, creates quite a creamy texture on the palate. Yeah,
it's wonderful. I think this also does benefit from a little bit of water. It's not as strong as a Glenturret. It's at 42%, so we're coming down a little bit. So if you are, you know, someone on here that does like a little bit of water in the glass, for me, it sort of really opens up into almost like a very tropical fruit sort of flavor and aromas, as opposed to, you know, sort of peach, apricot, and orange, and all sort of the sweetness that you would expect as well.
Definitely loads of fruit. Just a couple of drops you saw me put in there, and it went from that creamy, almost like, you know, for me, it's almost like a breakfast cereal-y type thing to start with, and then jumping out now and having a load more of that sort of really nice sort of fresh fruity notes, sort of like building. So I've never put any water in it before. I've just been quaffing it as this, you know, creamy breakfasty mess sort of thing, quite happily. Yeah, drop of water really changes it. Yeah. Oh, no. Anyway, Felipe, you got any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think Jura in general inserts malty aromas and flavors beautifully. And I've found this across a lot of different Juras I tried. Does so beautifully here. I bottled a Jura with my music and whiskey project. We did an independent bottling of a Jura, a single cask. Same thing. The maltiness comes through there. You find it in the 10-year-old. You find it in the old range of Juras as well. One of the things I loved about the Superstition, rest in peace, was that the combination of smoke and malt was just so lovely. And with the 7-wood, it's breakfast cereal. It's like a weird, I would say, if I'm going to name a breakfast cereal, I'm going to put it as the bastard child of Rice Krispies and cornflakes. And to kind of touch on what exactly is coming through to some degree and where that breakfast cereal thing comes from. And I just, it was a bit tricky whether this one should have gone after the Glenturret or not. I just figured that little whisper of smoke just means that maybe put it a little bit later. But it is such light peat smoke coming through. Yeah. And
it is. Yeah.
Why so light? How do you guys do it?
Why so
light with the peat. So what was the thinking in deciding to make, where the old range had a variety of smoky levels, shall we say?
Yeah.
Why so light with all the new ones?
I think, well, I mean, it's definitely there to offer a little bit more of consistency to style, the style of whiskey that we make. And, you know, you guys were touching on those words being used in the industry. And they're very much there for a reason, because in the past, the very much beloved range of Jura whiskey, we thought had become somewhat confused in itself, and definitely somewhat confused to the wider consumer, which is where Jura whiskey is really comfortable playing. And we want to be part of that conversation and part of that whiskey moment or whiskey experience for anyone and everyone. I mean, it's been so good to hear you guys talk about do what you want with your whiskey, have it however you want to have it, and just get on with it, right? As long as you're drinking whiskey. And that's what we're doing with this. We've sort of gone about, you know, producing a more consistent style of aroma and flavors, and running that through the range, where we begin to explore different type of cask and different types of woods that can be used to build on this sort of foundation of a very light, fruity, floral-driven style of spirit, the wonderful sweetness in behind it from American white oak. That smoke just, again, adds just a little bit of muscle and structure, but it's certainly not prominent. I mean, a lot of people that try our whiskey don't actually realize that it's there. So, you know, it's not something we lead with. It's something we always encourage people to try. And it comes up in conversation. Oh, is there a little bit of smoke in there? Sure. This is why.
I did sort of cheat because I knew it was there, and therefore I looked for it. But at the same time, and it used to be a little bit more prominent in those early releases when you first started doing them. But this is now this gentle sort of like charred note hiding in the background. As you say, just adds a bit of weight to it, and yeah, really sort of works well. But no, you're very much, you know, right on that old Jura range. A lot of people absolutely loved it, but nobody really loved the entire range. Everybody had their favorite because it was so a little bit all over the place. But again, learnings from there are being rolled back into these new whiskies. And I've always sort of found that if there's something in there that you liked, you can find something either in the new Jura range or something else that's knocking around. You know, there's always something else, you know, and the lovely people at White & Mackay can almost certainly find you a whiskey to fit the bill. So
yes.
Oh, yeah. But no, it's been great to see the revival of Jura a few years ago, and now the revival of Fetiken as well. A distillery which has been very much misunderstood over the years, you know, and is now putting out some really weird and wonderful things again. Tamnavulin again is sort of like, you know, out in the you know, I'm a big fan of what White & Mackay do. Although I have noticed that Gavin posted up above, you're talking about adding ice and being allowed to add ice. His comment was just, maybe you'd like to ask Richard Patterson, you know, White & Mackay master blender, or former master blender. I'm not entirely sure where he is at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, Richard Patterson is still very much part of the business,
cool.
But sure, you know, sort of over time, he'll sort of be, you know, stepping back. And look, Richard is a gem, and he's a real part of the industry, and will always be held in, you know, the hearts of many of us. But he's not getting any younger, is he? You know, he's
no. At the same time, I think he's on to year 4 of his retirement tour, which was meant to be 1 year. The pandemic just gave him another couple of years of touring.
I don't think he's ever going to entirely leave. You know, it's in his blood. Richard Patterson is whiskey, right? I mean,
and at the same time, you know, he may have handed over to Greg. If you go and ask him for some ice for your whiskey, he will still throw ice at your head. If you know. So just be careful, anybody who goes to ask Richard for a bit of ice. Oh dear. But anyway, that's right, Joe. And that's another question, but not a relevant one for the moment. But hey, Felipe, should we move on, or do we just say? But Mark, thank you very much, and also thank you very much for showing us, you know, a little corner of Jura as well, because I was really privileged to visit Jura years ago now, probably 6-7 years ago, before you redone the thing. And it was one of the best trips I've ever been on. If anybody has a chance to get over to Jura, if you're visiting Islay, just go over to Jura for a day. It's a place it's really beautiful. It's really, really calm. There is one road. Literally, there is one road. You know, I've heard tales of people turning the sat nav on when they get off the ferry, and it's really follow the road. And, you know, and right at the end of the road, there is a little It used to be a table. I think it's now going to turn into a shed where you can get cake and tea. I thoroughly recommend visiting Tea on the Beach when you get to the end of the road. But no, fantastic place, great distillery to visit. And yes, thanks a lot, Mark, for joining us and telling us all about the Jura 7-wood.
Appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks so
Thanks
much.
a lot, man.
As we transition to the next whiskey, I'm going to have to do a pretentious bluffing tip. Yes. So, doesn't matter what whiskey you're drinking. Here's another line you can always use. Oh, wow. There's so much coming through here. This whiskey is just so complex. Now, complex is a wonderful word that you can use with many things. You can use it with wine, by the way. I'm giving you all a double whammy there. You can essentially, even if you're not sure that the whiskey that you're drinking is complex, feel free to use the word anyways, and you'll still sound smart. You will also genuinely encounter whiskeys that you will feel are actually complex. There's just so much going on here. You're not sure how to put it all together, but there's something really intricate there. Great. But you can use the word whenever. And you can combine it with the vanillins, right? Like this is so complex, but you can really feel the tonka bean coming through the oak so nicely, right?
The thing you find, Felipe, though, is it's actually that interaction between the vanillins and the tonka bean flavors, which, you know, it really brings out an extra level of complexity that you just don't find otherwise. Absolutely. It's so easy to talk rubbish.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So
I don't like giving this away, really, because this is literally what I do for my job, mate. You know,
we're giving ourselves really. It's we're talking ourselves into obsolescence. So up next, gang, we're going to go to the baby bottle. So it's going to be the Royal Brackla 18-year-old up next. Now,
I already poured wrongly, but never mind. Yes, right. Anyway,
as people get this ready, we're going to engage in further pretentiousness. Yes. Now, what I recommend, and first, I got to change I've been bad about changing the chirons. Boom. There we go. So with this one, we'll do, we did a little bit of pretentious nosing before. With this one, I'll do a little bit of pretentious tasting. So I have to emphasize, by the way, there is no right or wrong way to nose or taste whiskey. Everybody's got their own way of going about it. And feel free to take as little or as much from whatever we might show you over the course of the tasting. But to taste a whiskey, a good way to go about it, and this is my way of going about it. If it doesn't work for you, totally cool, but hopefully it does. Take a small sip, let it sit on the tongue for a second or two, and then move it around the mouth, move it around the palate, move it around your entire sort of taste system, and then go ahead and swallow it. And after you swallow it, let out what I like to call a baby dragon breath, like a pretend you're a baby dragon. And the reason I have you pretending that you're a baby dragon is that by doing the baby dragon, you're going to emphasize and amplify the residual aromas that are going to be in that whiskey. I am going to lead by example. I'm going to slightly ham it up for the sake of showmanship. Billy will just kind of stare horrified at me.
Felipe, ham it up? No.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh, that's a good. Yeah, you worked on that, I can tell.
That sort of combination of like weight and satisfaction. Yes. Yeah. And remember another good line I like to say. Oh, Billy. Yes. But
working on it.
The other one I like to say is if you put on a constipated face, you show that you're really serious, right? Like, right? And that gives sort of a. Anyways, that's what I'm talking about for this beautiful 18-year-old whiskey, aren't I? So with that, the Royal Brackla. So this was a whiskey that originally was sold in Taiwan. And then they expanded to travel retail. And then they just decided to make it available to everyone, or as far as they could distribute it in any case. So Royal Brackla is owned by Bacardi, by the way. They're owned by Dewar's, which is owned by Bacardi, the rum people. Some of you may have had some wild nights on the Bacardi. Anyways, with the Royal Brackla, what we've got here, Royal Brackla in a way, or shall we say modern Royal Brackla, is quite new. Really, there was the first modern launch, and I'll just keep using that word modern to signify that in 2014, they really decided to focus on being a single malt brand. And then a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago now, maybe I think right before the pandemic, they did another launch where they just really opened it up. They just relaunched a bunch of their whiskeys, and so this is part of that. This is part of that relaunch campaign, and the result is frankly absolutely delicious. And already we're seeing in the comments. So Emily's saying, "OMG!" in caps, delicious. And then on YouTube, Julian is saying that this just melts away in the mouth, and yes, it does. It's just got so. And I think this is a great example of how a light profile whiskey can still deliver so much. There's that combination of floral, and you can throw in your chosen flowers, orange blossom, jasmine, even a hint of lavender if you want to go that far. I think to an extent that does come through. And then on the palate, to me, it's like the two things that stand out to me about it, which I find really fun: cotton candy and sandalwood incense, especially on the finish. That's why I wanted to do the dragon breath with this one. Hopefully that brings out the sandalwood thing. And so with this whiskey, they've matured it in ex-bourbon casks for 18 years. And then they moved it on to Palo Cortado sherry. Now, when we are talking about sherry, we are talking about fortified wine from the region of Jerez de la Frontera in Spain. Notice that I nailed the pronunciation. Now, with Palo Cortado, you have many different types of sherry. Palo Cortado is one of them. And in the spectrum of sherry, the whiskey industry tends to use what I'll call heavier sherries, Oloroso and PX. Those are the most common ones you'll encounter. There are other ones that get used and stuff. Palo Cortado is kind of more in the middle of the sherry range, I would say. And here, if you can, what's going to be nice is that we're going to try the with the Lakes Distillery up next. We're going to see the effects of Oloroso and PX. Here, we're seeing the effects of the Palo Cortado. It's 17 years in bourbon, I think 1 year in the Palo Cortado, and the effect is really soft. It's really subtle, nothing too crazy. We're not going into darker, syrupy regions that sometimes Oloroso and PX, Pedro Jimenez, can do. And the result is something that's really subtle, but very complex. Very, very complex, legitimately so. Billy, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, well, you say about the sherry influence, it's a very different sherry influence to those big dark sherries you're talking about. Those are the Olorosos, the PXs. They're big oxidized sherries. They don't have any sugar left in them, but they have all these precursor flavors that make you think of dark, sweet things. Whereas Palo Cortado sits between that, but also has some of the elements of Fino sherry, that sort of lighter, crisper, drier, citrusy style. And for me, that's what comes through in here. That you say that cotton candy thing, but combined with a light sort of like lemon and lime marmalade type thing. It's glorious citrus thing, but it's just weighty enough to make you think of sherry casks. At the same time as not going down the, as previously mentioned, Christmas cake route. And so, yeah, this is something which you wouldn't necessarily immediately go, is that sherry? And that, yeah, it's really, really interesting the way I've done that. Yeah, and Brackler as a distillery has been a little bit all over the place over the years. You know, the folks at Juras didn't really know what to do with it, and there have been some really expensive releases. If you, I'm fairly sure it's Brackler. If you want to look up the Holy Hand Grenade, if you just type in Holy Hand Grenade Royal Brackler, you'll learn what I mean. Just very expensive, strange whiskies that nobody really knew what to do with. And then they've really sort of locked onto what they want their house style to be in their malts, and are getting it out there and reintroducing people to this whiskey, which is predominantly well known through independent bottlers, but is now finally getting, that understanding within the company itself and stuff. I have not tried this one before. I've heard tales of it. I'm very pleased.
Well, yeah, I would say, Brackler is really interesting in that it's almost symbolic of something that we've been seeing, let's say the last 15 years in Scotch, where sure, we can point to all these distilleries have been around for so long, but actually we're seeing tons of distilleries, both large and small, that in the last 15 years have a lot of time been producing for blends. They don't know how to create a single malt for a public, and they're just trying to figure it out. And we're still in the experimental phase in a way, with a lot of distilleries that you might think, oh yeah, of course they'll know how to do it. Just launch a single malt or something. But no, the processes of the business is so weird, and the whiskey market's such a weird one, and it keeps getting weirder and weirder in a way. And so we're still seeing many what you think might be established distilleries actually trying to figure their way out with releasing new products that they just weren't doing it all before. And that's part of the fun of seeing how that emerges and evolves.
I've seen this entire range back since they were called the Last Great Malts when they first appeared. There's a guy called Stephen Marshall was looking after them. He's a lovely chap. I met him when he was running around beside his car with an axe wrapped in brown paper, shouting about his ex-wife. It was all very strange. But really weird guy, creates some great whiskies, then handed over to the next generation of people who tried to work out what to do with them and move them around in different ways. And outside of Craigellachie, the whole of that range has shifted around so much, but it's now sort of seems to have settled down again. It's really an interesting place to see what they do next, but also what they do with what they've got again, which is great. Yes, Jason, there was a lot of context to the axe wielding thing, but I feel that giving the context will not help in any way, shape, or form, will make him seem any less mad. Anyway, great chap, Stephen. Does just totally ridiculous things, and man, I've got a lot of time for. But one of the comments, where has it gone here? Just lost it again. Yes, sweet but slightly dry, Adrian's saying. And it's that balance for me, which is the really great thing about it. So it doesn't get too cloying, but you have this lovely perceived sweetness and this lovely drying note sitting next to each other really nicely. But no, great. Well, yes, a problem here, though. Be careful here. Both the dragon breath and the French technique are both dangerous things. Here we got Michael saying that he was asked after swallowing to hold breath for 1 second for every year of the whiskey age and then breathe out. Almost passed out after a 30-year-old whiskey. I've heard that one before as well. And if you sort of do a really long Colin Dunn from Diageo talks about holding the whiskey in your mouth for a second for every year that it's been in the cask. So you go for 30 years, then go, that's enough hyperventilation, over you go. And with the French technique, yeah, I almost passed out myself. It's dangerous. Be very careful. This whole nosing and tasting thing is a very dangerous affair.
It is indeed. We should really put in a hazard warning, right?
So we are professionals.
Exactly.
We are scarily. We are actually trained, and that's a worrying situation. But still, yeah,
we're essentially the jackass of whiskey, right? Like we can go on MTV and engage in these kinds of things. But in any case, because I can't resist, and because I don't want to leave it too late, I'm going to throw in another fun technique that I just.
Should we move on to the next whiskey, and then you can throw in a thing while we're pouring?
Yes.
Yes.
Up next is the lakes. Billy, thank you. Up next is the lakes. I'm going to change the Chiron while I'm at it. Billy is modeling it beautifully, and we will have our next guest on soon. But before we have him on, some of you will have seen social media influencers do a thing called the duck face. The duck face looks like this. Now, the duck face is really good for nosing whiskey. And what I would say is don't necessarily do a full-on duck face. Try to bring your upper lip up towards your nose so it's a bit more like this. And what that will do is it'll make your nostrils naturally flare up and make your sense of smell more sensitive. To the extent that I would say put more distance between the nose and glass while trying the modified duck face, doing lots of little snips, gentle snips, maybe using the French technique to find the ideal distance. And you're going to look like an idiot doing it, but it does work. And this is a trick that I learned from my drummer/business partner, Paul Archibald. I won't claim credit to this one.
You do look ridiculous. I just looked at myself and it's not a good look. Well, you do it so well though. I can't do that.
Practice. I wake up, I train, and that's some people. I stand in front of a mirror and I make faces like that, and that's how I roll. With that, we can't go much lower than that, so we're going to bring on the amazing Dhavall Gandhi from the Lakes. Dhavall, let's welcome you. Dhavall, hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, guys. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, dear. Well, good to we've got your the one and your
yes.
Focus. There we go. Your sherry cask finished version of your of the one. This is a line which has got a sort of vaguely long history, but this is the modern version. again, using the word modern in a,
Yes.
this is your whiskey, which you sort of like, grabbed and sort of like changed from the old versions of it. So tell us about it. What is it?
All right. So to put into perspective what Billy is saying, I started with Lakes in 2016, and this blend was there. So some of you might have tasted this. It was a blend of different countries put together. And when I came in, I decided to change it. And this one blended whiskey portfolio at Lakes is pretty much my sandbox. It's a place where I do anything I want to do in a way. And this has more to do with a little bit of geekiness about oak. And people who know me, I work a lot with sherry casks. That's what I spend my time on. That's my research area as well. And what I wanted to do before I became a whiskey maker, I was a whiskey geek. And the first thing that I always wondered was, what happens if you put the same whiskey in different casks? What happens? Yes, you can get different cask matured whiskeys in the market, but the parameters are very different. Some might have a different distillate profile, some might be at a different distillery, different cask type. So what I did with one was to create a new blend. So the blend recipe was designed by me to hold up to active cask maturation. So the blend was designed for maturation, not maturation was designed for the whiskey. So it's the other way around. And the way I did that was to have a little bit more robust malts in it. So it's Speyside, Highland, grain whiskies from Scotland, and also Lake single malt at the very heart of it. Now that allowed me to create a pretty much like a blank canvas, or you can call it a tofu. And what I wanted to experiment was take that tofu every year, make it identical, but put it into different oak cask to see what happens when only you change only one parameter, So it's the same blend. So we have the one cherry, we have the one port, we have orange wine, one muscatel. The base blend is absolutely the same. So every year I create a massive blend and put it into different casks. So you can actually compare apples to apples and say, okay, so muscatel cask brought this to the table. And I not only changed the recipe, but I also changed the recipe of the cask profile. So what I mean by that is every year, one sherry is never the same. So I will change. So this time it is more driven by Spanish oak, Oloroso, and PX. Sometimes it can be driven more by American oak. Sometimes it might be only hogsheads. Sometimes I use sherry butts. So I keep on playing around, like I said, with a sandbox analogy. So anyways, before I go into too much detail, we can taste. And again, it's a dangerous game, like Billy was saying a moment earlier. But again, very simple, elegant. I wanted to approach it more like a single malt rather than approach it as a blend. So it is blended like a single malt. So quite intense dried fruit character. A lot of dates I get. That's one of my favorite character to get in a PX and Oloroso cask. A lot of sultanas, a lot of wood spice. And there is a gentle peat smoke. And I added peat not to make it a smoky whiskey, but just to add a bit of complexity. And it differentiates from the Lake single malt, which is unpeated. And the blend has a little bit of peat from Islay just to make it a little bit of complexity in it.
Yeah, I say it's just like when we were talking before about the Jura. I don't know if you're hiding in the background then, Dhavall, but the thing with the Jura was they have this tiny little bit of peat in there to sort of add a bit of richness to it. And again, this is fairly rich whiskey anyway, thanks to the cask you've used. But it adds another element, and then it's like in a different direction. It adds a sort of different type of weightiness to it.
Yeah, and all the whiskeys, ever since I started with Lakes in 2016, I made one change was everything is natural colored, non-chill filtered. So the color that you see is coming from Spanish oak, Oloroso. Oloroso is pretty much the structure or the backbone, and PX just to give you that layer of complexity, at the same time mouthfeel, the creamy texture that you get, that's coming from the PX. And I use Spanish oak hogsheads and puncheons. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the hogsheads are smaller in size. It's 250 liters. Puncheons and butts are 500 liters. So the smaller cask will have more surface area to liquid ratio. So you would have more interaction with oak, and you get more active oak extractives coming through in the liquid. But it's all about the balance. So it's all balanced out and blended, just like you would do with a single malt.
Yeah, because I say it's got a lot of weight to it. It's got a lot of spice to it, and again, it's one of those things. You take the whiskies from Scotland, but you also take some of the some younger whiskey from the lakes, some sort of like, you know, fresher, zingier stuff, and you combine it with those whiskies from Scotland. Really, sort of combining very, very different styles. And I know that, you know, it's a difficult one. I know trying to work out what to put on the bottle, it's quite difficult to work out what to say when you have English whiskey and Scottish whiskey together. Were there any difficulties with trying to balance those two different styles?
No. So what I do is, you know, that's why I've changed the recipe in 2016. I've added a little bit more of the Highland malts into it, just to balance off the lakes. Lakes is quite, it's not very light, but it's light, creamy, had a little bit of depth to it, but I wanted to have a more body. And I think the body was important, and a slightly oilier character was also important, because I'm using a lot of Spanish oak cask, also European oak cask I use French, Hungarian, Romanian, but pretty much Spanish is quite core to the makeup. And to have those casks, you need a spirit that can hold everything together, and it's not overpowered by oak.
Yeah, I would say this definitely isn't. There's definitely, you can taste the whiskey underneath the wood in there, and this is one of the things I know you and I've discussed this before, but one of the things I like about your whiskeys is that even though you do use quite a lot of oaky character and use cask quite a lot, there is always that balance between the underlying spirit, and you can taste it in there as well, because that's a thing which sometimes can get lost. And this, you know, yeah, ever since you introduced the lakes, the reason why I jumped on this one is because I'm a big fan of it. I didn't like the old sherried lakes, but this one, as you say, since you changed it, has become, you know, one of my favorite everyday drinkers in the on my shelf. So that's good. I say Adrian's just popped up and said it doesn't taste like a blend. It's very, very smooth, and for he's a non-peaty whiskey drinker normally, and he says it's a really good balance of the sort of different flavors. And my mate Nikki's saying that it's very flavorful under the wood. So yeah, you have some compliments going on. So good work.
If I can throw a question, Dhavall, just because you mentioned how you want to prioritize Spanish oak, could you? I know that doesn't quite cover the remit for this particular whiskey. Could you actually, for geek's sake, mention a little bit about what oak from other countries or other European oak varietals or European oak species can sometimes do?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and I'll try my best to answer it. Historically, it's always been classified as European oak because, you know, the supply systems were not as controlled, where you didn't know where the oak was coming from. There were sometimes mixed tapes coming in. But because the relationship that I have with my supplier, you know, we pretty much get the oak we want. Now, Spanish oak is quite porous, okay? And because of its porosity, the liquid goes quite deeper into the oak, and there is a lot of interaction. So you get a lot of texture coming out. Now, if you look at, you know, your fingers, if you kind of quite porous, the liquid will go all the way in. While on the other hand, American oak is quite tight grain. So the liquid doesn't penetrate enough in it. And there's also less extractives coming in. And that's why American oak whiskeys, aged in American oak, are much more lighter in color than Spanish oak. You also have French oak, and I use two French oaks. I use Robur and Patria in my makeup at lakes. And Robur brings much more heavier, earthy, damp character, while Patria will bring you much more lighter, fragrant, floral, and almost a lot of vanillin as well coming from Patria. Patria used mostly for wine, and Robur is mostly used for cognac or Armagnac. But I find that a good balance of both brings amazing complexity. The other one I also use is Romanian oak. Romanian can be a lighter style, so it is European, but it has more American oak characteristics. So it's kind of sits between, if you have a spectrum, a Romanian or Hungarian will sit between the Spanish French on one side and the American on the other side. So you have a good combination of both. But for me, at Lakes, I've narrowed down into 3 pretty much that makes all of our whiskeys is French, American, and Spanish. I hope that answers. We can go on and on.
Yeah, I know. You did a superb job in bringing it all together very quickly, because I know it was, I know that we could easily just spend hours.
Yeah. Oh dear. But so along with this, you have your own ranges of stuff at the Lakes. But what else do you have? Let's say the Lakes whiskey in general, people probably have heard about a bit more than the one, because, as you say, it's this range which you rejigged and relaunched. So do you have sort of plans to do some more sort of special edition ones? Because I know you have now, you say the sherry and the port and the regular one. Are there more coming, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So every year we have the 3 core range coming through. So I know we call it sherry, but every year the recipe of that sherry is different. So even if you buy the bottle this year, it is going to be slightly evolved recipe. It's different. It might focus more on Oloroso. It might focus more on sweeter style sherry. We also have limited editions that we make every year. So last year we had orange wine and Moscatel. So those were the 2 ones. So one was exclusively Moscatel in different types of oak. One was orange wine cask in French and American. And this year we are going to have 2 different editions. And we also have port editions that we make every year. So the first year was Ruby Port. So it was 100% Ruby. Second year was Tawny Port. The third expression was a combination of Ruby and Tawny. Then there's an exciting one coming up soon as well, so which is going to be quite different than the other ones. So yes, we do have the 3 ongoing ranges, but we also keep on tweaking the recipe every year just for fun.
Excellent. I say one of the things that you seem to do quite a lot the Lakes is never really sort of sit still. There's always a new thing coming down the road, a new thing around the corner. So, but anyway, Felipe, I think we probably need to move on in a little bit.
We do. I'm going to warn everybody now. We did say we're going to end at 8:30. We're going to slightly overrun because we have awesome people to talk to. Now, what I have to criticize both of us, Billy, we have not congratulated Mr. Gandhi on being awarded World's Best Single Malt at the World Whiskies Awards. So Dhavall can right now claim to be one of the world's best whiskey makers. So it's the Whisky Makers Reserve number 4 that has recently been crowned world's best single malt. The fact that an English whiskey is getting this is, frankly, we've said nothing, but it's kind of a big deal. It's kind of a big deal, and in a way, a marker overall of where English whiskey is going, because it's really interesting, the Lakes and beyond. So Dhavall, a huge congratulations. And frankly, shame on us for not congratulating you as you should be congratulated.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thanks for the.
I was waiting for the end. You beat me to it, No, I was sat in the room on the night and had a chat with the folks from the Lakes who came down, and there was just like a reception line pretty much for Kirsty of people who just come up to say, we didn't expect that, but well done. And again, it is a really big thing for English whiskey. They finally had an Irish whiskey win it. The best single malt is not like best whiskey in the world, but it is, of all their awards, it's the one which is best, generally sort of like, best whiskey. And Scotland and Japan have been winning it constantly for a really long time. So yeah, excellent work. Finally, England's taking it back again. Well, for the first time. And yeah, anyway, we'll see how it goes. I don't think it's good. We may have accidentally sort of like fired the Scots up in a way to try and beat us back again, but no, Whiskey Making number 4. I even did a video on it for work about how much I liked it. So there is a video out on the Whiskey Exchange YouTube channel telling everybody how much I like the Whiskey Makers number 4. I'm very pleased that everybody else did too. Great whiskey, Dhavall. So yeah, properly well done. Yeah, I think I probably owe you a beer now. Excellent work.
Thank you so much, and hopefully see you soon. And I might be at the Lakes. I might actually be going to the Lakes soon. I might get to. My little brother is based in Newcastle, and he's getting married in early May. and there may be a family trip to the Lakes District. And hopefully I can convince the family to go drink some high-strength alcohol over at yours, Dhavall.
So they got a nice cafe as well.
We'll open up a studio and we'll do some whiskey tasting.
Amazing. Dhavall, thank you so much. Let's move on, gang. So there's a reason we left the final whiskey last. So everything we've tried so far has been between 42 and 46% alcohol. For those of you that have the pack, you look closely at that label and you'll see this one is rather a little bit stronger, shall we say. Do try it neat first. Do try it neat first, and then add as much water as you need to, because it is a bit of a beastie. But you don't need me talking to you about this one, because we have the distillery manager of Glen, Scotia with us. So we better welcome Mr. Iain McAllister. And I need to change the Chiron. I'm so bad at this. Boom. Iain, hello and welcome.
Hello, guys. Hello. How are you? How's things?
Oh, it's all good, Ed. All good. There we go.
Better as we drink, I'd say.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
I say we're on to our 6th dram, so everything is going very, very well.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for having me. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to have a chat with you. So fantastic. You've some very interesting chat there. So yeah, well done. Well done. Fantastic.
Excellent. So, Felipe, do you want to jump in and ask things, or?
Well, I would say first, that is one beautiful looking background you have, Iain.
Yeah. Well, I'm afraid I'm actually sitting at this is where I spend not all my time, but I spend a lot of my time at this desk, this very old desk. And unfortunately, I can't show you the desk, but this desk was in the distillery when I started back in 2008. And for anyone that knows the distillery, the visitor centre, this was one of there was actually 2 desks. I've only got one left now, but they're 1970s desks, so they're very me, I think, so yes, so yeah, fantastic. This is the where I spend my life, as I say. So fantastic, guys.
Could you tell us a little bit about a portion of your life called the Glen Scotia Victoriana and guide the people through it, please?
Absolutely, yes. Well, the Victoriana, and everything about it, is obviously that's the packaging, guys. So for anyone that's never seen it, okay. So, yeah, I mean, the Victoriana is obviously meant to symbolise, and it does symbolise that Victorian era of whiskey making in Campbelltown, which obviously was dominant. And I think it really, it conveys that. It absolutely, slightly in a refined way, because I guess you've got to appeal to the many rather as a few. But yeah, it's a fantastic whiskey, and it really, for me, it's very important. It's obviously part of that core range at the distillery, but yet, it still conveys the importance of Campbelltown, the region. So, what have you got in it? Well, absolutely. It's a non-age statement. As Billy mentioned there, it's 54.2%. There've been different variants of it, but this is the one we've settled on at the moment. It's a batch. It's batch made, as most of the core range tends to be fair, but small distillery, batch made. You've got an average of whiskies from anything from 12 up to 16-year-old there. And again, there's a lot of percentages here, guys. You know how it goes together. If you're looking at different casks in there, we've got first fill, we've got second fill, we've got a little bit of refill American oak hoggies. So all these give different characteristics. We've got a little bit of the distillery character coming through there. We've got some that's got body in there. And of course, that little bit of peat. You need the peat. Obviously, that dirty peatiness has got to be sneak in there and give it obviously give it that authenticity, if you like. So it's got all these aspects going on. So if you take that ratio there, as I say, 60, kind of 30, 10, it follows, with the first fill, second fill, and a little bit of peat in there. We'll take these casks okay, and we'll split them and we'll place them into 70%, as I say, heavily char, a real heavy burn in that American oak, and 30% into PX sherry butts. We're going to leave them for 12 months in their individual casks. Then we're going to take the two liquids and we're going to marry them together. Okay, and that marrying process could potentially be in a refill bourbon cask, exhausted bourbon casks. So it's going to vary. It's going to vary, and you've really just got to look at the different aspects of the original makeup, if you like, and that'll obviously dictate how you put that whiskey together. So there's a lot to it. There really is. It's for me, as I say, it's so approachable. It really is. It's it's got a lot going on there. It's got a lot of that Campbelltown characteristics there. Which is is what you want. It's robust. It's got a bit of slight oiliness there, subtle salinity. It's very, very approachable whiskey. It really is. Non-chilled filter, natural colour, what you would expect. Yeah. Need I say more?
It's got that weightiness you're talking about, that oiliness. And again, we're trying to work out, Glen Scotia is a distillery which does lots of different things. And, you go from the sort of the richer, sweeter styles all the way through to this very old fashioned, dirty. It's not quite so, not so dirty as some of the earlier batches were. I think you've made it a little bit more elegant these days, than it once was. But no, really, that little bit of smoke and sitting there alongside everything else. We've got a comment from Ruth in the chat which just says that can clear the sinuses as well. If you're not ready for a 54% whiskey, it's a bit of a smack, but at the same time, quite a pleasant sort of like a kick of flavour.
It is, Billy, and I think that's that's what I was mentioning there. You've just got to get it right where it appeals to many. You don't want to get, and believe you me, I would go OTT with it, But yeah, you've just got to get it right. You've got to be sensible about it, and you've just got to get the right approach, And as I say, it's got to obviously convey the distillery. It's got to uphold the region. So there's certain aspects in there, descriptors in there, that coastal Campbelltown, funky, whatever you want to call it, that background's got to be there. But yes, it's got to be a whiskey that you would come back to, a whiskey that you enjoy. It's got a wonderful flavour profile, i.e. the fermentation, the distillation is correct, so we're getting a lovely balance there. And obviously the casks and how we pull that together, obviously really, it really upholds that regionality. So yeah, I and the Victorian has kind of grown in me. I think it really has. It's always been one that I've enjoyed, but I think obviously the symbolism of it, is really obviously it really stands out now for me. It's a wonderful drama.
I've got to ask you, so just because I have been able to try the Victoriana over the years, I've been lucky to do so as well. And we were talking about what it used to be. Could you go a little bit over how it has evolved? And was it always the 70-30 mix that you're talking about in terms of the casks? Or has that changed and you've found what it's going to be from now on?
Well, absolutely. And it's everything, everything starts off somewhere, Felipe, so obviously, the original day one, you're always trying to understand exactly, how is this going to work? Because at the end of the day, you don't know, and it's every day is a school day. Even for me today, it's you're learning, you're constantly trying to understand how X whiskey reacts with X cask. And as I say, I'm a distiller, that's what I do. But for me, there's so many opportunities to get involved in the casks and the association with that new make spirit, if you like. So yeah, I mean, as I say, it's obviously it's fine tuning, and Billy hit on it there earlier when he says, obviously, this is obviously variant. Oh, good. What we are variant number 4, I think it is. So you're really trying to just get it where it needs to be. So that obviously involves tweaking, changes, looking at casks, looking at the burn in the cask. 5-minute burn. Does it need that? Is that detrimental to it? What is that burn given? And the type of sherry cask you've got. So there's a lot to obviously consider there, and probably more important than that is the original cask makeup. So your first fill, your second fill, the percentage of peat in there, and again, that any refill hoggy aspect in there. So you're looking for the body. You're looking for obviously a wonderful flavour profile, and you tend to get that slightly. In recent years, it's slightly fruitier. It's slightly more accessible to many, whereas the older stuff, is slightly drier, slightly dirtier, but it's got more of that body, more robustness to it there. So you're looking at different aspects there, and it's something that there's no easy answer to. You've really just got to get stuck into it and have a play about and see how it works. So yeah.
Well, just to change tack a little bit, just because I saw a great question in the comments, James Mack has asked, Iain, are we now living in the second golden age of the Campbelltown region? What do you think?
Absolutely. Campbelltown, and it's a bit ironic, and as I say, I don't really like saying this, but it's because it's affected a lot of folk very, very badly. But ever since COVID came along, things have changed drastically for us at the distillery. And it's all been positive. I mean, we've obviously been affected by it. Everyone's been affected by it, and it seems to have been a benchmark, and it's. I see Campbelltown really, really coming to the fore now. It's Springbank's obviously. They make whiskey that you can never get because they're that popular. There's so much in demand. Glen Scotia's again moving up the rung a bit, because Glen Scotia had whiskey that when you go back a few years nobody wanted. So it's certainly a positive process in Campbelltown. You're obviously looking at new distilleries in Campbelltown, which I think is absolutely wonderful. Rathsay, fantastic distillery. Dalriata. So there's certainly a renaissance there, and that's a fantastic, a fantastic way of describing it, because it is a renaissance, and it's fantastic to see. As you know, I'm kind of biased with Campbelltown in general, so no shame about it either. But anyway, it's great to see. It really is, because as I say, I remember the dark old days at Glen Scotia when no one was interested. You'd never seen. It's wrong to say no one was in it. There was plenty interested, but there was never the level of interest there is now. So it's wonderful, and for that I'm eternally grateful and very, very feel very, very humbled by. So
I think it's the whiskey I remember that really put you guys back on the map again a few years ago was those first editions of Victoriana. It really, Glen Scotia's always been this distillery of sort of many different faces, depending on how things are being put together, and the independent bottlers going back into sort of older, sort of the proper old school dirty days, and then some of your more recent whiskies are really sort of sweet and elegant. And all of a sudden, this whiskey which came out just said, "Hello, we're old fashioned. We're not particularly upset about the situation." And we're also very powerful and strong and cask strength. And everybody from the whiskey geeks to the people who are sort of just looking for a new dram or suddenly went, "Wait a minute, what's that?" And really, I've seen again with the investment in Glen Scotia, when it was sort of revived along with Loch Lomond back whenever that was now, ages ago now, so 8-9 years ago, whatever it was.
2013, Billy. Yeah.
13. Yeah, 9 years ago now. Yeah. Ever since then, seeing that investment and that growth of both the distilleries and seeing the sort of the more of a free rein you guys have been given to actually create great whiskies, it's been really lovely to see. And all the way through the core of everything, Victoriana sitting there doing something a little bit different and sort of really driving the distillery forward. So, congratulations on a great whiskey, but also, being one of the distilleries that's definitely sitting at the forefront of this new sort of like interesting Campbelltown and helping drive that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Billy, it's as you say, and it is credit to, I guess, my boss too, because, they really don't interfere. They just let you get on with it, and as I say, I learned so much from my original, who took me on, my original boss, John Peterson, who worked at Loch Lomond. He was a fantastic guy, he was a pure academic. And I learned so much off of John, it really did. It was fantastic. He really was a very unassuming, quiet guy, but he's so much knowledge. I've never met anyone with so much knowledge, scientific knowledge. I think I was his problem student, right enough. But anyway, he tried to teach me as much as he could, I guess. But yes, he's. And from from that day onward, it's been fantastic. The guys, everyone that works in the distillery, they go above and beyond, so it's for them, it's fantastic. It's fantastic to see, obviously when everyone, yourselves, Billy, Felipe, and everyone else here, it's fantastic for me, when you enjoy the whiskey, because after all, that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's just about sharing a dram or two. So brilliant.
Very much so. Yeah. And a great whiskey to end our tasting with as well.
Absolutely. To me, there's an American candy called a Tootsie Roll. I'm sure, hopefully some of the people have tried it. But it's like it's like a weird version of a toffee candy. I'll describe it that way. And to me, this is almost like a liquid Tootsie Roll in a glass. It really, I love it. I love it. So I was very pleased when we were putting these packs together that we could get a hold of some of it. And what a great thing to be able to share. And I think it's truly one of the great accessible cask strength whiskeys that you can take a whiskey newbie, throw them in the deep end of the pool through the Victoriana, and they're probably going to be able to manage it. I've regularly, when I've used this in tastings, people always go, "That's way smoother than I thought. That's way tastier than I thought it was going to be. Oh, there's so much going on here." Consistently with this one. And it's credit to just the fact that, yep, you guys make good whiskey. But yeah.
I'll just say from the comments, be very careful, people of Campbelltown. Georgie Crawford,
Yes.
incredible island distiller. She just said that she's coming down to see you this weekend. So just be careful. She's dangerous.
Oh, so. Brilliant, Georgie. I'll maybe catch up with you. Maybe get a dram with you. Brilliant.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, should we move on, unfortunately, and wrap up the evening, Felipe?
Yes,
so, yeah.
We're running. We're probably, by the time we finish concluding things and promoting ourselves, perhaps, we'll be running slightly about 15 minutes late. So thank you so much to everybody for joining us. Iain, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this whiskey with us. So this has been our charity online tasting. Thank you again. As I mentioned before, in the description to this video on both YouTube and Facebook, there's a link to donate to Polish Humanitarian Action, who are doing amazing work helping refugees fleeing the violence in Ukraine. Please do donate, because that's what this tasting is about, as well as drinking great whiskey and finding out more about it. And that's pretty much it. Thank you. I'm Felipe. This is Billy. Iain there as well. And if you want to find out more, you can Google us or something. Billy's, what we've not mentioned, by the way, and Georgie was poking at him in the comments quietly, Billy's written a whiskey book recently, The Philosophy of Whiskey. It is the orange book in the corner. Billy has not mentioned it yet, so I will promote it for him. It's a wonderful whiskey book that you should buy, and it's easily available at the Whiskey Exchange and published by the.
It's available all over the place, but also it's only little. It's only little. Okay, so it doesn't take long to read, and it's also really good for propping up tables.
Yep, but also published by the British Library, so you know it's not fake news, people. So yes.
And Felipe's written a cocktail book, which I don't have a copy of to hand. So you should definitely go and find that as well.
Yeah, either.
You're not very good at this, man. You really need
to work or something. But yeah, so in any case, with this, we'll call it a night. Thank you so much, everybody. It's been a pleasure. We are ending the broadcast. Good night, and may you all feel fresh as daisies tomorrow morning.
Good night.
Bye-bye.